In this topic, it may seem at first like we've diversified into dispensing dating advice. Far from it. What we're going to talk about in this tutorial is about managers and their approach to their stakeholders and different theories about how they can try and manage the relationship that they have with different internal and external groups. So one theory that we can look at was developed by a couple of academics called Syatt and March, who laid out 4 different approaches that managers may well use in order to try and manage their relationship with different stakeholder groups and achieve the organisation's goals through those approaches. The first one is known as Satisficing, which is an approach to managing your relationship with your stakeholder groups that's based on negotiation and compromise. So using regular communication with different stakeholder groups, listening to and understanding their needs and what they expect or they demand from the organisation, managers can take those into account when making decisions, and hopefully through Satisficing, they can make decisions that stakeholder groups are broadly supportive with, or at least understand the reasoning behind each decision. So using constant communication, understanding what each stakeholder group wants from the business and what their perspectives are on different decisions that could be made, hopefully the business can achieve its goals through having the support of different stakeholder groups, or at least understanding of why decisions have been made. A different approach is known as sequential attention, which really comes from the standpoint that managers can't always keep all stakeholder groups happy when they make a decision, because different stakeholder groups might have conflicting needs. For example, shareholders and employees might have conflicting demands or needs from the organisation. So your shareholders might be demanding greater dividends at the same time as your employees are demanding greater pay. And those things are really in tension with one another. If we're going to reward greater pay to our employees, that's going to build up the business's costs and damage our profits, and then we can't award the higher dividends that our shareholders are screaming for. So we've got some conflict, we've got some tension there. In order to manage the relationship with those stakeholder groups, we might use a sequential attention approach. It works on the basis that stakeholders have their needs met almost one at a time, on the proviso that when they've had their need met, they then join the back of the queue and they understand that they will be further down the pecking order in terms of having their needs met in the future, until they make their way back to the front of the queue, and again it's their turn to have their needs recognised and met. So we might, for example, say to our employees, okay, you can have your pay rise this year of 4% on the proviso that you understand that we will not renegotiate pay for another 3 years. And then 12 months down the line, it may be the shareholders' turn to be at the front of the queue, and you award them their greater dividends whilst your employees are at the back, knowing that they've got their pay frozen for the next foreseeable years. Our third approach is known as side payments. And that's where managers are negotiating with stakeholders and they can't actually give their stakeholders the primary thing that they are bargaining for. But they try to secure their support and their acceptance of decisions by perhaps offering them something lesser in return. So it may be, for example, that a business is deciding to make some kind of strategic change. Maybe it's bringing in a whole new suite of technology. And as part of that, employees and their trade unions are perhaps demanding greater pay because now they've got to embrace new technological advancements that's going to change the workings of their jobs. Now, it may be that the business is not in a financial position to offer that higher pay, but they want to keep that stakeholder on board and on side, so they offer them a side payment instead. So they might say to the trade unions or their employees, we can't give you the pay rise that you are demanding, but instead we will pledge to train all of our new employees in the workings of this new technology, maybe even putting them through some kind of qualification so they have something extra as a skill set. And it's not what the employees were originally looking for, but it might just be a side payment that's big enough to appease them as the managers try to get this decision through. The final approach Syatt and March offered is called exercise of power. So rather than negotiation or compromise, exercise of power is where managers literally force their decisions through even if it is to the disgruntlement of different stakeholder groups. So it's really going to be adopted by firms who feel that they are in a powerful position, perhaps feel that the stakeholder groups that are reluctant to accept their decisions maybe don't have too much power to influence them. So the business feels that in order to achieve its goals, it has to force this certain decision through, even though it may be unpopular with some stakeholders, but that's the way to make sure that the business gets to where it envisions going. Now, on top of those 4 different approaches to managing stakeholder relationships that Site and March proposed, we've got a couple of other things that may get factored in when managers are plotting their relationships with different stakeholder groups. So the first of those we've looked at in a different tutorial. You should check that one out if you haven't seen it already, on using Mandelow's stakeholder maps in order to try and work out which stakeholder groups are most important, your key players, to keep satisfied. But another factor that might get involved in managers when they're deciding how to manage their relationships with different stakeholders groups is the ethical stance of the organisation that they work for. Businesses that don't have a very strong ethical stance may be able to force through decisions with a little bit more of a focus in a clearer conscience, whereas businesses that are very ethical and where corporate social responsibility is a key part of what they do may feel that they can't force through certain decisions because it really just wouldn't be ethical and it just wouldn't be fair. Another factor that managers are going to bring into play when they're managing the relationships with their their stakeholders, is their corporate objectives as well. If there's a decision out there that may be unpopular and may be being met with some resistance from different stakeholder groups, but it really is necessary in the eyes of managers if they're going to achieve the corporate objectives of the organisation, then again that might be something that's just at the forefront of their minds when they're negotiating or where they're communicating with their different stakeholders, and they might just say, you know what, this decision is so big, this is so crucial to where we want our organisation to get to, that we are just going to have to force through this decision. So what we got there is a range of factors that might just play some kind of bearing on the relationship that managers try to build and foster with the different stakeholder groups and might just govern some part of the decision-making process. Be great if you could hit the like button down below, subscribe if you want further updates as new videos become available, and if you've got any requests for new videos, pop them in the comments box below. We'll see you very soon where hopefully we'll talk you through another key business topic.